All right, good morning. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist this morning. So we're here at the Monmouth Research Facility. I think the site is technically closed today from the ice storm. So site security probably doesn't know I'm here. So don't tell them that I snuck in. And we are open for business here this morning with Ask the Agronomist. Hopefully the roads are not too bad where you are. It's a little treacherous around here. I stepped out on my deck this morning, leaving my house, and had to shuffle slide over to the side of the deck where I could step down into the yard because the steps on my deck, I would not be here. I'd be in the ER had I tried to walk down the steps. So it was a sheet of ice. The parking lot here at the research farm is bad. A little bit slopes uphill to the door here, so I'm glad you weren't watching me skate my way up to the door. Roads were better than I expected them to be, so you can get around. Just don't be don't be stupid, as they say, and you'll be fine. So, anyway, just happy to be here with you this morning on Ask the Agronomist. Had a great day yesterday at our Yield Chaser event in Peoria. I know there's some Ask the Agronomist faithful watchers who were at the event yesterday. So great to see you all there. We had a nice turnout, had a really good meeting, some good speakers, not counting myself, and had some fun celebrating big yields. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of share the results of our contest winners, just to kind of give them a little more recognition. We like to do that, and then also talk a little bit about NCGA yield contest results. And then, behind me on the board here, I've got a list of things we'll touch on later. If you're thinking about, if you've been motivated by something you've seen or something you've heard to, maybe want to enter a yield contest next year, ours is super easy. That's the nice thing about Yield Chasers. It does not have the rigor that's associated with NCGA. It's easier to enter. It's easier to submit your yield. We're pretty trusting, and honestly, we probably get some yield results that are not completely accurate because of the way we allow yield data to be collected, but it's all in good fun. We trust you. Please be honest with us. If you're using a field region report in climate, like most of you do to create your entry, it would be nice if you had verified the yield of that field and done a post-harvest adjustment before you draw that field region report, so that, I know your yield monitor said that field made 120 in soybeans, but it probably didn't. So let's be honest. Let's be real. We had some exceptional yields this year. So had a couple people ask me at the Yield Chaser event, if these yields were higher than normal, what we saw in the contest, and they certainly were. So we do 3 different regions, and within each region, we give first, second, and third place for corn, and first, second, and third place for soybeans. And this year, so you got 9 corn winners, 9 bean winners. This year, all 9 corn winners were north of 300 bushel, and 3 of the, no, wait a minute. 1, 2, yeah. And 6 of the 9 soybean winners were over 100. So big yields in this year's contest. And, I know sometimes people that, they want to participate in the contest, but they kind of get their dauber down a little bit that, well, if my corn didn't make 300, I'm not even going to turn it in. Turn it in. Anybody who enters the contest gets invited to the banquet. I'll talk about the banquet a little bit. So I'm going to give a shout out to some people that really helped make our event nice yesterday. So the venue in Peoria, if you're looking for a cool place to have a big party or have a wedding or something, venue, and I hope I say their name right, Chisca, CHISCA, in Peoria. If you Google that, I'm sure you can find it. Cool, like kind of in the old warehouse district in Peoria. Really good AV equipment in there. Had a sound guy there with us the whole time. Had nice screens. Had good projection equipment. Bar. Really nice place. So if you're looking for a place to have a big party in the area, I'd check that out. Our caterer, which has been our caterer, I think all 3 years we've done this, is Trails End Smokehouse. And if you ever go to precision planting events and you've ever had a really good steak there and you wonder how can somebody cook 1,000 steaks, feed them in 40 minutes and make it that good, those people can. So again, Trails End Smokehouse in Goodfield, Illinois. Kudos to those guys. And our crowd was a little short yesterday, which meant we had quite a few steaks left over. About 50 of those found their way to my house, and so I fed my parents and my son and several members of my family well on some really good steaks. Desserts. So we go a little overboard for desserts. So the lady that runs We3 Sweets in Lincoln, Illinois, bakery business, she makes these miniature pies that are, you know what like a banquet pot pie, if you buy pot pies in the grocery store, about half that size, but in a little tin foil pan, just like a pot pie would be in. And it's an actual pie. It's just miniature. It's about that big around. And I can eat 3 or 4 of them. You shouldn't, but I can. And then some other little pastry fancy. She's way fancier than we are, but man, it tastes good. And then our featured keynote speaker, a man named Patrick Connor with Hush Blackwell, which is a law firm in St. Louis. They focus on estate planning and kind of, that whole thing about death and taxes are the 2 things that you can't escape, and they're experts in that. So had a really good presentation, and I think for farmers in particular, that whole estate planning issue is a big deal. Farm estates are worth a lot of money, so you might be north of the tax exemption levels, and if you're trying to pass that farming operation on to the next generation, it's you got a lot of planning to do there, and you really can't start doing that stuff too early. And Patrick Connor was an excellent speaker on that. I've sat through presentations of that before. I'm actually going through that process myself right now, and he made it easier to understand for me than some other people I've listened to. So great job yesterday from our keynote speaker. So thanks to all those folks that helped make our event a success, and thank you to all you customers that came and shared it with us. I'm going to look real quick here. Okay, so we got a question come in from Dirt Doctorful, and his question, talking about sulfur rates, is it a one-size-fits-all for different yield goals? So the short answer to that would be no, it's not. And secondly, if we have really wet April, May, we would probably add supplemental N. Shouldn't we do the same with sulfur? Okay, so couple excellent sulfur questions. So I do not have, Adam could probably look this up for me. I think Adam is logged on. Adam, if you have it handy, look up the sulfur removal rate per bushel for corn and soybeans, if you would, please. I don't have that number with me. But like any nutrient, doesn't matter whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, even the micronutrients. Researchers like Dr. Bilo and others, and that's why I asked Adam, because he would have actually been involved in some of the work that Dr. Bilo was doing on this at the time, know how much actual nutrient is going to be removed from the field per bushel of grain. And that's how we know, if you're doing a removal rate fertility program, that's how we know how much you need to put back based on what your crop just yielded. So when you do the math on that, the more the crop yields, the more nutrient gets removed. And there's a correlation between removal and uptake. So uptake is the amount of nutrient. I got too much stuff written on the board. Move over here. So uptake is the amount that the plant takes up. So this would be uptake. Removal leaves with grain. So Plants are going to take up a lot more of every nutrient than they actually remove. So the removal rate is what you need, kind of the minimum amount you need to put back if you want to keep your soil at that same level of that nutrient. But you got to have more there for the plant to be able to take up what it needs to. And as yield goes up, so do uptake and removal. So I threw out a number at in my presentation yesterday. I think of about 25 pounds of sulfur, and when I'm talking pounds, I'm talking units. So if you're putting on a product that's 50% sulfur, to get 25 units of sulfur, you have to put on 50 pounds of that product. So when I say 25 pounds of sulfur, I'm talking actual sulfur, not fertilizer. So if you're using a product that's 40% or 50% or 60 or 75 or whatever the percent nutrient is, you can do the math on how many pounds of fertilizer you need to apply to get that 25 pounds of sulfur. Let's see. Yeah, Adam's reminding me, we call it harvest index for a given unit or for a given nutrient. So you can do the math based on what your yield goal is, in theory, how much sulfur you need to apply. And, then you can get into what form, so if you're going to use elemental sulfur, it's not readily available. So if you're going to try to use elemental sulfur the year you're growing the crop, you're going to need to put on way more than that 25 pounds of sulfur, because only a percentage of what you're applying is actually going to be available to this year's crop. Now, if you put elemental on every year, you're kind of slow releasing that over time. If you use a sulfate form of sulfur, which is what ammonium sulfate would be, thiazole, some of the products that we use that you might be familiar with, that sulfur is available, immediately to the plant. It's also losable. So that's dirt. The second half of Dirt Dr. Full's question there is, if we get a ton of rain, sulfur is extremely mobile in the soil. The soil cannot hold sulfur. You don't really I personally don't pay much attention to sulfur soil tests, because that sulfur is very transitory in the soil. It's moving. It's going to go with the water. So if you've got a well-tiled field, which we all like because well-tiled fields yield more, it's relatively easy to, sulfur is going to go with the water. If the water is going out the tile line, it's taking sulfur with it. Now, we don't necessarily lose sulfur through denitrification like we lose nitrogen. So nitrogen you can lose two ways. You can lose it up into the air as a gas when the soil's too wet, if it's poorly drained, poorly tiled. If it's well tiled, well drained, you're going to leach it down either out of the root zone or down to a tile line, and it's going to go someplace that we don't really want it. It's going to go someplace where the crop can't use it. So a couple different options that might work in your scenario there where we get a lot of rainfall is, if you've got some elemental sulfur out there, you would have only lost what had been mineralized. What has yet to mineralize, you haven't lost that yet. The other thing to consider is, when do we put that sulfur on? So if you're side dressing, you can side dress sulfur. If you're using starter, you can put sulfur on with the planter. If you're making a pre-emergent broadcast application, you can put sulfur on then. So generally, we recommend fall applications of sulfur should be elemental sulfur. And we recommend spring or in-season applications of sulfur should be ammonium forms or sulfate forms of sulfur. And that way it's more available to the crop, but you're less likely to lose it. And a lot of people end up using some of both, because people will throw some cheap elemental in with their dry spread in the fall, and then they'll use some thiazole or some sort of ammonium sulfate form of sulfur in the spring, and you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's what I do on my farm. I use both elemental and sulfate forms, generally elemental in the fall, generally sulfate in the spring. There are some blended products out there that are a mixture of elemental and sulfate. And just be aware, if you're putting those on in the fall, in Dirt Dr. Full's example, the sulfate portion of that product that you put on in the fall may or may not be available next spring and summer when your crop is looking for it. So I think, let's see here. There we go. BELO research says that a 230 bushel crop takes up 23 pounds of sulfur per acre. So that's the uptake. That's not the removal. But that's a 230 bushel crop. 230 is not going to get anybody excited. And as you change that 230 into a 280, 290, 300, that 23 pounds is going to go up significantly. So there, Adam, 13 pounds removed. So there's the ratio. So for sulfur, and as Adam correctly pointed out, that's the harvest index, is the difference between those two numbers. So it's going to take up 23 pounds, and it's going to remove a little more than half of that, 13 pounds. But as your yields climb, both of those numbers are going to climb as well. So I would like to put on, personally, this is probably, you can probably get by with less, especially on a high organic matter soil, unless you're trying to win a yield contest. So there's kind of two separate conversations here. You trying to win a yield contest, or you're trying to make money? Because they're different. And you're probably going to make more money doing less than you're going to do when you try to win the yield contest. But if you're trying to win a yield contest, I would probably put on the amount of sulfur each year that you expect the crop to have to find. And then you're not counting on your soil for any sulfur, because sulfur comes from soil organic matter, also comes from manure. So if you've got soil with high organic matter, or you've got soil that's had a history of manure, those are your two sources naturally of sulfur. We used to get sulfur in the rain every time it would rain because of acid rain and air pollution and bad stuff like that. We've cleaned up our act. We don't get free sulfur when it rains like we used to. So that's one of the reasons that we need to be applying sulfur more regularly. The other reason is, you used to be happy with 180 bushel corn. Now you're out with a pitchfork looking for your seed dealer if your corn only makes 180 bushels. So 280 requires things that 180 did not. So we're in a different world these days as far as what the crop's looking for and what the crop needs to achieve the yields that we're trying to achieve. So good sulfur questions. Thank you for the sulfur questions. He warned me yesterday that he could have asked that at the Yield Chaser event, but he was saving it for Ask the Agronomist, and I love my guys that ask questions on Ask the Agronomist. So thank you, Tom. Okay, so let's get a little more recognition here. So just hopefully I don't embarrass anybody. So I'm gonna read off the names of the winners really quick from our Yield Chaser contest. We recognized them yesterday. They got their awards. They got their plaques. They got their really good steak. Oh, speaking of the steak, this was funny. I dropped off some steaks for my mom and dad, and my dad raised cattle his whole life, so they've eaten a lot of beef, but they never ate the good ones for themselves, and they're not probably really into the preparation piece of the steak. And neither am I. I mean, I cook most of my steaks and you're going to cringe, I know, but I cook most of my steaks in a skillet on the stove. So a little bit of seasoning, but I'm not a grill master. I'm not into that much. But anyway, so these steaks were already cooked, already seasoned by professionals who know what they're doing. I got a text from my dad last night. He said, that steak was amazing. Now I understand why seed corn costs so much. So good learning opportunity for my dad. I'm going to look here. Let's see. Okay, so Adam's doing more math for me here. So assuming a linear relationship as yield rises, a 300 bushel corn crop is going to remove 17 to 18 pounds of sulfur. And that's why my recommended application rate is about 25, because that's going to be closer to that uptake level. On a high organic matter soil, especially if you've used any manure, you don't need that much. You can get by with less than that. And you can do some of that as elemental in the fall. You don't have, and elemental is the cheapest form, and it's also the easiest to apply because you can just throw it in with your dry spread. Although when you're doing that, be aware that it doesn't spread as good as P and K, especially if you're at low rates of P and K. The P and K kind of has to act as a carrier for the sulfur because it doesn't fly as far. And if you're doing VRT applications and your P and K rate gets really low, and you're say running your sulfur in from a different box or something, sometimes you can get some streaks in fields, and people don't see that when they're not using sulfur. They start using sulfur and they get these streaks, and they get really upset because they think they got a poor job of application. What they don't realize is they're not seeing yellow. They notice the yellow streaks in the field, but I like to point out, well, actually what you've got are green strips in the field, because if you hadn't put the sulfur on, the whole field would be that uniformly pale yellow of the strips that you're complaining about. So it's actually the application caused green streaks in the field rather than the application caused yellow streaks in the field. Just kind of a different way of looking at it. So anyway, back to the recognition part here. So for the northern region, our winners in corn, John Loitz was first, Johnston Land Farms was second, and Hars Farms was third. There's really no loser in that list there, because third place was 311. So it was quite a year on soybeans. Hars Farms were first, so that's nice balance there. They came in third on corn, first on beans. So nice job. Carl Schultz was second, and Adam Olin was third, and it was really tight competition there. So we had a 98 and 297. So three of them were separated by less than a bushel there. In the central region, we had Jared Stock was first, Scott Garlies was second, and Miller Land and Cattle Companies, shout out to my Fulton County brethren there, was third. And in that group, third was 313. So pretty impressive. Soybeans, crazy yields here. RM Farms was first, Rick Boyer was second, and Ben Onken was third. And in this group, lowly little third place, 104. So amazing. Southern region, Poffenberg Farms was first. West Seifert was second, had a tie there at a really big 336 number. Groves Farms was third at 331. So those guys in our South Central region were really getting it done this year. Soybeans, equally impressive, all well north of 100 bushel. Groves Farms was first. So once again, had a third place in corn, first in beans. So that's pretty impressive. Lynn Ash was second, and Jeff Beam Farms was third. So just some outstanding yields from some outstanding farmers. And one thing you'll see with yield contests, once people figure out how to have success in a yield contest, they just keep building on their success. And so you pick up NCGA results, and you'll see, the names, the Kevin Kalbs and the Randy Dowdys of the world, and the Heath Cuttrells, and David Hulas, and those are they kind of become household names because they've got it figured out. And every year they just keep building on their success. Here in Illinois, Troy Uphoff, always there, always at the top. Last 2 years in Illinois has set new state records in Illinois, proudly with the cow hybrids, and we'll talk a little bit about the NCGA results here in a bit. So I thought this was interesting. So I took just our yield chaser event from yesterday. So as I said, we award nine winners in soybeans and 9 winners in corn. And if you can see this list of soybeans, 38 XF3, 27 XF3, 36 XF4, 40 XF1, 33 XF3, and 39 XF3, what do those beans have in common? I mean, they range from a 2.7 to a 4.0. I'd say that's a pretty damn good soybean order if you're looking for a soybean order. But those 6 beans all achieved, a winning placing in our yield chaser event. So we gave away We had 9 winners. Those 9 winners actually used 6 different beans. And you see that in the NCGA too. So in NCGA, we had, there were 63 uniquely different DeKalb hybrids that won in NCGA. So there's a lot of farmers out there using a lot of different stuff, having success with many different products. On the corn side, it was even more amazing. So 110-10, 68-35, 66-18, 66-04, 64-22, 59-82, 67-94, 66-06. So that's 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's 8 different hybrids with a yield contest that had 9 winners. So almost everyone was using something different. I think the only one on that list that was in there twice as a winner was 6606. And it's sort of in there 3 times because 6604 is the Smart Stacks version of 6606. And 6606 just happened to be our highest yielding hybrid, DeKalb hybrid in the NCGA contest. And then 6835, which is also represented in our contest. So we had, well, let's see, I'll make sure I get this right. There's 27 national winners in NCGA, and proud to say that 15 of the 27 were DeKalb entries, most wins of any brand. And 9 of those 15 national winners happen to be the same hybrid, 6835. So it's not any accident that that's the #1 volume DeKalb hybrid in the country. A lot of you in this area are planting it for the first time this year. We're planning to sell even more of it next year than we did this year. But really, really exceptional hybrid. The other thing that's so I did a little math here. So in 2024, 56% of the national winners were one brand. Happened to be mine. Got the winged deer on my hoodie here this morning. And then this is cool too. So over the past 4 seasons, 60% of the national winners have been using DeKalb products. So thanks to all those good farmers out there buying our good corn hybrids and making us look good by the efforts that they put into winning the NCGA contest. And I'll give a shout out to our top Illinois producer, new state record, beat his previous year's state record. So and he's beating his record at a clip of about 25 bushels a year. So that rate's probably not going to continue. But if it does, it'll be cool because we'll have the Illinois record will be over 400 bushel by next year because this year it's almost 386, so 385.88. They take NCGA gets a little carried away. They take those yields out to 4 decimal points, which is the statistical. I'm not a stats professor. But I think a good stats professor could probably explain to you why you're really not accurate to 4 decimal points when you're calculating corn yield. But that's all right. We won't get into that. But anyway, congratulations to all the winners. Appreciate those of you who like to utilize our products in the NCGA contest. Thanks to those of you who participate in our Yield Chasers event, which is kind of a it's just for fun. Although the prizes are kind of nice. I mean, if you win, so all 3 of these, 6 of them actually. So all 6 of these top place winners from our yield contest got a free trip to the Commodity Classic this year if they wanted it. So they're we got some skin in the game here in our yield contest as well. But it's not as rigorous as NCGA. Like I say, you can use a field region report, the 10-acre field region report, to do your entry, or you can weigh 1.25 acres if you would prefer to have a scale weight. But you don't have to have scale weights. You don't have to have inspectors. You don't have to have judges. We're pretty trusting, so don't abuse our trust. We trust you to be honest when you do those entries. But we're going to continue our contest next year. I'd love to see more entries. I'd love to see more people participate. It's a lot of fun. We just love to recognize the success of our customers and appreciate you. So again, if you have questions, please chat them in. I'm solo here this morning, so my my producers are dropping like flies. So Jennifer is in a new role now, and Adam is moving into a new role, and so the last few here I've been doing them solo. So if if you're looking for something to do every other Thursday morning, and you want to be my new producer for Ask the Agronomist, you can send put your name in a chat there, and if you want to drive to Monmouth, every other Thursday morning at be here at like 7:15. I got an empty producer chair currently, and it is helpful to have somebody in here with me to watch the chat. So if I miss your question in the chat, I'm sorry. You can complain to Adam about that. So anyway, and I didn't announce what Adam's doing. I'll let Adam do that himself. But he's got big things coming up, and we're gonna miss him. So anyway, this list here in no particular order, other than just kind of how they came to my mind, are things that you might want to, well, not might want to, things that you have to take into consideration if you want to have a legitimate shot at winning a yield contest. So first and foremost would be the field. I mean, you can't take most of the ground that I farm and win a yield contest. You can set a new yield record in your crappy field of 224, but that's not going to get you an honorable mention in anybody's yield contest. So you need to pick a high yielding field. You guys know what your best fields are. You obviously if you're going to do a yield contest, you're going to pick your best field. And then within that really good field, the whole field's not the same. Now I did hear a story. This was actually an NCGA field that they had an 80-acre field that they were doing their NCGA entry in. The yield of the NCGA entry was low 300s, 302, 303, 304, something like that. So, very, very, very impressive. But even more impressive, the average of the 80 was like 302. So I kind of teased them a little bit. I thought, well, you didn't pick your spot very good if your acre and a quarter yield matched the average of the 80. So you need to find those sweet spots out there. And one really good way to find sweet spots is with your field health imagery from climate. So field health images always correlate very, very well to yield maps. But if you've already harvested the field, it's too late to, turn in your entry for NCGA. If you're above 300, you got to do it twice. You got to have judges. You got, when you're contending for a win there, they're going to make you jump through some hoops to prove that you're being honest. And so you need to be very diligent and very intentional about what part of the field you take that yield check from. And those field health images will help you identify where those sweet spots are, so that you're not just guessing where the best corn in the field is, or you don't have to jump around. And what some guys used to do is they would pick through the field, lay off several lands, and as they're doing that, they watch on the yield monitor and they find out where the good spots are, and then they go take their yield checks from there. So that's not cheating. But that's what it takes to win a contest if you're trying to win. So area of the field makes a difference. So tillage, you all have your own opinion as to what the most high yielding tillage system is. And in our contest, we're not as sophisticated as NCGA. We're not separating it by tillage. We don't have a no-till category. We don't have a strip till category. We don't have a ridge till category. We don't have a conventional category. We even lump irrigated and non-irrigated together, which is totally unfair. But again, we're keeping it simple. And when you're going to keep it simple, that's what you do. But in NCGA, I apologize for my cough here this morning. That didn't start until I went live. You got all these different categories. And so you're only going to compete against people in that same category. So, you can do whatever tillage system you want. You can enter in multiple, some guys have conventional entries and no-till entries. That's a lot of people do that. So if you want to get really serious about winning a contest, your wife's going to have an entry, your 3 kids are going to have an entry, your dog might have an entry, you got different tillage system entries. And one thing that people don't often think about is you can enter multiple hybrids too, because you never know. I mean, I can tell you that 6835 and 6606 and 6618 and 11212 and 11041. I'm just listing off like hybrids that I think are awesome here. But I can't tell you in every field which one of those is going to win every time. So if you want to increase your odds of winning, well, you plant several different hybrids. And then whichever one has the hot year, well, then that's the one that ends up being your entry. So that's not cheating either. That's just increasing your odds of winning. So crop rotation, there used to be this old, I'm going to call it a wives' tale. Some of you might think that it's sound, proven academic science. It's not, but some people might think it is. There used to be this perception that the big yield guys were all doing long-term continuous corn. And there was something magical about long-term continuous corn. And over time, that soil just started to love long-term continuous corn. And the nutrient cycling and the biology of that long-term continuous corn. And there was magic there. And it's like it's a little bit like going to see the Wizard in the Wizard of Oz. You find out that the wizard's a bit of a fraud. I don't think, and I'm not calling growers who do long-term continuous corn frauds, but I do think it is a bit of a misnomer that there's anything magical about long-term continuous corn. I think what it was, there were some really good farmers who had a really good system, who were having a lot of really good success, that were doing long-term continuous corn. That doesn't mean that the long-term continuous corn was the reason for the success. I think long-term continuous corn was a benefactor of the fact that that's what the growers were doing that were having the success. So my personal opinion there. So I'm going to tell you to do it on rotated ground, but if you want to do it corn on corn, you can certainly do that. So fertility is a big deal. I would say of all of the different things that you can do, and if your normal program is here and your NCGA winning program is up here, meaning it's a much more intensive program, the 2 things on this list that NCGA people probably do the most differently than normal people would be their fertility program, and that's a big subject. So that could be rate, it could be timing, it could be number of times you apply, it could be what are you using. There's a lot of stuff that goes into your fertility program. We're not going to get that deep into it, but fertility programs and fungicide programs are probably 2 of the things that there's the biggest difference between what normal Joe farmer like me and Kevin Kalb, winning NCGA yield contest year after year after year are doing on their farm. So we could spend a whole Ask the Agronomist session on fertility recommendations for high yield, but you need to we had a good conversation on sulfur. I mean, you need to be applying all of the macronutrients, and sulfur is a macronutrient. So you're going to put on nitrogen, you're going to put on phosphorus, you're going to put on potassium, you're going to put on sulfur. How much of those, that's going to depend on your soil, your yield goals, your own personal preferences, your budget, and again, for yield contests, you don't have a budget for yield contests. If you're trying to do a yield contest on a budget, then you have to find a yield contest that's going to pay you, you're going to win based on maximum ROI, not on maximum yield. So if you've got a budget for your yield contest, sadly, you're probably not going to win, because you're competing against people who have no budget for their yield contest. That's why most people's yield contest fields are a 40 or an 80. They're not doing all the stuff on their 3,000 acre farm that they do on their yield contest field. And that's not cheating either. That's just being aggressive, trying to win a yield contest. And if you want to win, how many of you have kids that, I grew up in 4-H. I showed hogs, I showed cattle. I never bought a show pig or a show steer or a show heifer. I showed what I raised. Today, that would be considered child abuse to do that, but so not back then. But anyway, we're talking about trying to win here, not trying to be reasonable, trying to win. So, and then how many hybrids do you do? How many varieties do you do? Well, you can't do, an infinite number. You got to have enough acres of each one of them that you've got enough there to harvest. And like in NCGA, if your yield is above a certain level, you have to do it again to prove that wasn't a fluke. So you got to have enough acres. I would say, you probably have to have a minimum of 10 acres per entry. I don't know what the rules say, but I'm going to say it's probably at least 10 acres of each entry to make sure you've got enough acres of it to do the number of yield checks that you might have to do and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room there. So you can't turn a strip trial into an NCGA yield contest. So just be aware of that. So population gets talked about a lot, and I would say 10 years ago, there were probably more people in yield contests that were planting what you would consider to be absurdly high populations. But what people have found over time is you need a high population to maximize your yield. But it doesn't have to be obscene. And there are many, many, many other things on this list other than population. And a rule of thumb that the yield contest people throw out there a lot is, they think you can achieve 10 bushel per 1,000 ears. So that would say, if you're doing everything else right, you should be able to yield 300 bushel with 30,000 ears. You should be able to yield 350 with 35,000 ears. You should be able to yield 400 with 40,000 ears. And if you're not getting to those yield levels with those populations, a lot of people would say something else is holding you back, and increasing your population is not going to increase your yield. So if you look through, eventually there'll be, when the full results come out, they actually publish quite a bit of information as far as, what population did guys use, what nitrogen, rate did they use? They'll tell you some things about what those NCGA guys are doing on those farms. And you'll see a lot of people, 38, 40, 42,000. I mean, they're not planting 32 in most cases, but they're not planting 52 either. Some people do. And at some point, if you're trying to raise 600 bushel corn, you're not going to do that with 40,000 plants. But there's a lot of people raising 350 to 400 bushel corn in that contest that are probably planting seeding rates not too different from what you're doing on your farm. So you don't have to go insanely high. Nitrogen's always a hot topic. How much do you use? When do you apply it? How many applications? What form? What timing? All that stuff is everybody's got their own, favorite method for, most guys that are winning in yield contests are using row starter on their planter. And I know a lot of us commercial farmers that are just, trying to make a living as a farmer. That equipment is expensive. It takes time. It's hard on your planter. It's another headache to deal with in the spring. You got to tender stuff to the planter. You run out of seed, but you're not out of fertilizer. You're out of fertilizer, you're not out of seed. It just makes things difficult. Well, corn likes it, and it's helpful to corn, and it's beneficial to corn. And a lot of these guys that compete in yield contests they've got a pretty elaborate starter system. A lot of them are putting starter on both sides of the row. Some guys got starter going on two sides of the row and in furrow. you got two separate systems. You got one product mix going out here off to the side. You got a different product mix going in furrow. So it's pretty intense. But if you've ever talked to any of these guys that win these contests, they are just a different breed of cat. I mean, they think about things that I don't think about. They worry about things I don't care about. I'm never going to be a yield contest winning farmer because I don't have the patience to do what they do. That's not fun for me. I mean, it's cool to see what they're doing. I wouldn't want to do that if you paid me to do that. I'm just not wired that way. But some of you might be. Fungicide. So a lot of people that are serious about winning a yield contest, they're going to use fungicide a lot more than you and I do. And it might not be paying on ROI, but it does drive yield. And so these guys are, they don't want anything holding their crop back from achieving its full potential. And, if a fungicide application is going to get them 2 bushel of yield, they'll take it. Oh, yes. So Adam threw out a good one. So there is a bit of a theme, that poultry litter is a little bit of, it has a little bit of magic in it. Poultry litter is a unique fertilizer source. It's not a cheap fertilizer source unless you're the one with the flock of birds, then it might be more cost effective. But poultry litter, if you talk to people that are achieving some miraculous yield results, we've got a colleague works with us. He's doing some organic farming. Poultry litter is absolutely part of his organic program. So it's depending on how far you got to truck it and where it's coming from, it's an expensive form of fertilizer. It's not the easiest form to handle, but it does do some pretty cool things for a crop. So just another secret, and another little secret, and you all know this, but I've always felt like in a soybean yield contest, there needs to be 2 categories. There's not, but there should be, because it is very unfair to compare the yield of a field that hasn't had beans in it for 10 years to a field that's 50-50 rotated. So if you're going to try to win a soybean yield contest, you probably need to be doing some corn on corn somewhere. And those need to be the fields when they rotate back into beans. That needs to be your soybean yield contest field, because it is very, very, very difficult to compete for beans that are being done, 50-50 rotation, to compete with beans that are following 4 or 5 or 10, years of corn. Okay, so weed control. So your weed control, probably on all your farms, is probably good enough to win the NCGA yield contest. But how you're getting that clean field does matter. So they're, the guys that are, really the high yield gurus, they're not making mid and late post applications of post emergence herbicides in corn. Even something as safe as Roundup on Roundup Ready corn, they're worried about that stressing that crop. So those guys are getting those applications on early. They're not spraying late post. They're controlling their weeds, but they're doing it in a way that has minimal chance of stressing the crop. And a point that I make all the time is, a lot of the stuff that those guys talk about as being vitally important and a big key to their success, probably don't become important till you get north of 300 or 350 bushel. So a lot of the things that they focus on, for us commoners that are raising 245 bushel corn, those things might not make that much difference. But if you're trying to unlock the key to, breaking the 400 barrier, or breaking the 500 barrier, or breaking the 600 barrier, different things start to become important, and the relative importance of things changes. Things that are important at 400 probably aren't that important at 260. But as you go higher, things become more important. Okay, trying to watch the chat there as we go. Insect control, obviously, I look at fields every year that are impacted by stink bug, by, last year it was aphids. If you had an aphid infestation in your yield contest field, you won't need to turn that entry in. So you gotta keep an eye on everything. These guys do tissue testing, they do sap testing. If you ever sit through a presentation from somebody who's ever won at a national level in NCGA, the amount of testing and the amount of scouting and the amount of just the vigilance that they keep over their crop. I mean, you got to be an OCD, level of crop farmer to want to do what those guys do. It's impressive to me. It's really cool. It's really interesting. I'm not going to do it. So hats off to those of you who do have that intensity level to be, in that category. So that's not obviously not a comprehensive list. That's just my list. The first things that came to my mind, things that you need to be thinking about ahead of time if you're going to try to win a yield contest. So obviously, you can decide after you've planted, that you want to enter a yield contest. But a lot of this stuff needs to be thought of and given some thought to and planned out before you plant, rather than after you plant, so that you can be more intentional and you can set yourself up to have more success. Got a phone call coming in there from a grower who could be watching Ask the Agronomist, but apparently he's not because he's calling me on my phone. So while I'm cleaning off the board here, if anybody has any questions they've been embarrassed to ask, now would be a good time to chat them in. I think we're kind of winding down a little bit here. We may not go the full hour. That was about all that I had on my mind to cover here this morning. And unless we get some more questions coming in, we might just go ahead and end a little bit early. But I certainly thank you for your attention and attendance, and appreciate you joining here this morning. Hey, thank you, Merle. Poultry litter versus hog manure regarding high yield corn. Okay, so I do think there is something special about poultry litter. Could be multiple reasons for that. With liquid manure, traditional liquid manure, the application of that product can be pretty detrimental to the soil. If you're doing it with a drag line, maybe not so much, but it's very disruptive. It's creating some compaction. The old method with a honey wagon or something like that creates a lot of compaction. And poultry litter is just, it has a different analysis. It tends to be extremely rich in calcium, which a lot of hog and cattle manure is not. So every different species has a little different analysis. I just think there's something different about poultry litter. Now, obviously, we got a lot more hog manure available to us than we do poultry litter. So we can't all just switch to poultry litter. But I do think that there is something special about poultry litter. I see mixed results with liquid manure. I don't always see a yield benefit to manure. There should be. Long term, I think there is, but short term, not always. And we do sometimes see things like we see a little higher incidence of crown rot on manured fields. I think the soil tilth issue, the soil compaction issue, the soil health issue, not to open that can of worms. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes my salesmen get a little nervous that I'm going to say something that's going to make one of their customers feel bad or create problems. So I like manure for its ability to supply nutrients and organic matter to soil. You don't always necessarily see a yield benefit from it. And depending on how far you have to truck it and how far, and what your application costs are, it might not even save you any money. I've actually used some manure on my own farm, And by the time by the time I paid somebody to pump it and haul it and apply it for me, it was not cheaper than commercial fertilizer. Now, if it's your manure, it's your hogs, and it's your buildings, well, that's different. And obviously, the people that own the hogs and own the buildings, the manure's got to go somewhere. So, if you're in a good situation with manure, I would get it. If it's getting drag lined applied, I like that better. If your applicator can commit to you that, yeah, I'm never going to have to mud it on your field because we got to get the tanks emptied, that's great. But if the cost of it's high, you got to truck it very far, the application costs are high. If the cost of the manure is approaching the cost of commercial fertilizer, I'm not sure it's better. So this depends on your situation. Anyway, thank you for the question. I did not look. So today's the 6th. I'm assuming 14 days from today would be the 20th. So let me pull up a calendar here and just verify when our next scheduled Ask the Agronomist is. Yep, February 20th will be our next Ask the Agronomist. And you can put that on your calendar, and we'll be back with you in a couple of weeks. So thanks for your questions. Everybody stay safe out there on the ice today. I know I make a pretty loud crash when I go down, and it seems like, I don't know why, but it seems like it's harder to get up than it used to be when I go down. So don't go down on the ice this morning. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.